Hi everyone, my name is Justin Oliphant, and the project that I'm going to be presenting to you guys today is called Zoetic Labs. Here it is. The main thing as well that I'm going to be focusing on is this idea of social network storytelling. So mine, it appears to be a little cut off here, but my name is Justin Oliphant, so I'm a filmmaker, a photographer, an editor, a storyteller. I also enjoy watching roller derby and baseball and things like that. This is my obligatory, this is a shot of me directing things. So I've been doing film work for about 13 years, just doing short films, my own work. It's just something that I do. For one reason or another, I just like telling stories. So that's that, and these are some of the projects that I've worked on. So they're organizations, so I started SCTV in Santa Cruz. There's a film that I did. There's another kind of project. There's blogs. There's just different projects that I've worked on over the last years. This is just a small handful of the many of them that I've done. I've also worked at a place called Image Movers Digital. Image Movers Digital is a motion capture animation company up in Novato. They were funded and supported by Disney, and it was great. It was a full studio run by Robert Zemeckis. As you can see, they did Christmas Carol and Mars Needs Moms. And I worked there as an editor and working in production as editorial support. The thing about, if you don't know the story, it's that Image Movers actually was closed. So in the middle of 2010, we got the notice that the whole studio is going to close down. It's like about 400 some odd filmmakers that are in the Bay Area that all of a sudden were kind of faced with this idea of what was next. During that time, I was looking back at the different works that I had done, the different projects, and where I wanted to go, and asking some pretty important questions, I think. And so with that, I started thinking about the idea of storytelling, and I got to eventually my next question is Facebook and social media. What are the storytelling opportunities with it? So I asked the question, how far can my social media network take me, and can I use it to tell a story? It's a two-part question, but still with a question. So if we go to the next one. So I started this project called Friend of a Friend Project. The Friend of a Friend Project, essentially its goal was to ask the question and answer. You can't read that, but you're going to have to trust me on this. It says, how far can my social network take me? And so based off of that, the idea was that I would go on Facebook and I would travel from place to place using my friends and my friends of friends suggestions. So I would get to a place like Austin, Texas. And in Austin, people would suggest places for me to go, things for me to eat, things for me to do. And then furthermore, people would then interact with me and suggest places to go next. It's like, well, you're in Austin, there's a great person over in Houston, and it's right down the street from you. And it's like, all right, great, I'll just go to Houston. And so I was sort of living this life of almost like a video game. People were just sort of like directing me as to where I was going to go, and I was just saying yes to things. I don't know if that's up there. So yeah, so the last sort of point was, to just say yes to things. Whatever came up, just like, sure, I've never done this before, I'll just kind of go with it. And to understand my mentality is that when I was working at Image Movers Digital, especially in editorial, if anyone's ever been in editorial, it is a lightless, soundproof room. And when you're working there for like 3 years, like the big thing is just like, I need to get out. I need to see the world. I need to do something. I don't care what it is, just gotta go. And so that the idea of not necessarily knowing where I'm gonna be day to day, place to place, and just kind of going out and seeing and experiencing new things was pretty exciting. So that's what I did. So a typical interaction that I would have on Facebook kind of went like this. I'd all of a sudden get to Washington, D.C. I'd go on my little Facebook and I'd say, all right, I'm going to change my current city from Baltimore, Maryland to Washington, D.C. So I'd change my little status. And then within moments, you'd have like moments where it's like, oh man, you are in my old hood, You should totally go to this restaurant. And I'd be like, all right, sure, where is it? And they'd tell me where to go and what to do. And then you can see the dated stamps on there. So June 2nd is when I was suggested on where to go. And then by June 3rd, I was there with my host. And so we went off to these places. And so I traveled for a while kind of doing this. And so asking the question, how far can my social network take me? Well, over 6 months, I went over 50 cities. I traveled across the United States and Europe. I also met up with over 80 hosts and personal guides. These are just a small handful of the people that I met. Because I was doing photography work as well, I did portraits of all of them. And these are just, like I said, sort of a small sampling of all the people that I met along on my trip and my journey. Then the next question, though. So can social networking tell a story? I think some of you may already sit there and go like, well, of course. But let's go into it. So for me, I was looking at all the opportunities and the tools that were out there and available to me. So I was, first of all, you kind of see there's, my Facebook. Everyone knows what Facebook is, right? Just making sure. On the right, Facebook is a giant social network platform. On the right is a YouTube channel. I had a Twitter feed. I had a Facebook page, and I had a Flickr photo stream. If you go to the next one. I also had a blog page. I had a Google map, which actually, all the places that I went were all plotted and pointed. And so you see the little push pins. Push pins were where my hosts lived, and all the dots were where we went. And as well, I have a photo blog that I just took a photo every day and then posted it. So for, I think it was 600 days, I took photos, posted it, and that was sort of fun. And so, each tool has its pros and cons at what they're good at telling stories with. And I also found what was interesting is that even when I didn't post specifically as to what I was doing, that people started interpreting what I was doing. They had ideas and concepts. They'd see a photo of Chicago, and it's like, oh man, that's amazing. You must have done this and this. And so people were filling in these blanks of what I was kind of putting out there on social networking. So, can social network tell a story? I think it was yes. That was great. Had a lot of fun. And in fact, I find it was a very, it says success with Friend of a Friend project. It was very successful. It was something that was absolutely incredible. The social networks connect users and story and the characters closely. So, even as I was traveling in Paris, the people who were my hosts in Montreal were able to still connect with me and still talk with me and still suggest places for me to go. And as well, the finding the right tools to tell a story was an important part of that. So you started finding out, it's like, well, Twitter was really good at, telling this part of the story. Flickr was good, but I found that most of the photos that I would have put on Flickr, I was actually putting on Facebook and tagging anyway. So was there really a point for some of this? So, this whole project really allowed me to go out there and, go hands-on with the tools and figure out what's the best way to tell these different parts of the story about what I was going through. In the end, I ended Friend of a Friend project because I found it was actually much more of a documentary. It was a live-action documentary in many ways. And as a person, you may seem that I'm very open and I can chat with you about anything, but it's like there are moments and there are things that were happening in my life that it was just, I didn't necessarily know if I was comfortable putting it out there. But that's not saying that I wasn't comfortable putting myself and projecting it onto a character. And that's where my background was creating stories and characters. And so for me, it came to a point where I was like, you know what, I just need to end this, and I need to apply all this and put it towards a fictional story. So I came back to San Francisco, declared it as my home base. And part of that was also the idea of developing a community of transmedia creators, and immediately began taking those lessons and putting it onto my next project, which is Zoetic Labs. So we're finally at Zoetic Labs. Sorry, it took a little while, but I promise you it's worthwhile. So as you can tell, these are these little robots. And the idea was to create this thing called Zoetic Labs. Oh yeah. Oh, see, and look, and if you're ever wondering what the robots look like, this is the mock-up. I'll tell you why this is important in just a minute. Cute, right? Okay, so the thing with the Zoetic Labs, I started looking at it and I started thinking about the ideas, how to structure this, how to kind of create this. So the first thing was to, take all the lessons that I had just kind of put out there on Friend of a Friend and make that as sort of like the groundwork for it. The next thing was this idea of theme-based storytelling. So it wasn't necessarily about just telling one storyline, one character, but this idea of like, well, what's the theme? What is it that I'm trying to get in touch with? What is it that I'm trying to express with this project, these projects that I'm doing? And then building the storylines around that and making sure that everything goes into it. Hold on. The next thing was letting the audience experience the magic firsthand. This was another thing that was sort of important, which I'll get into. And engage the potential audience more thoroughly than traditional passive media, and then create a story with touch points that are released over time. That'll be another point that I get to. So if we move right along. All right, so the basic storyline. So that's Henry. So my name's Justin, this is Henry. I realized that, for me it was this idea of I wanted to create a character. And so what I did was, first of all, I set it in modern day. It's 2012. And Professor Henry Lightman is asked to figure out if the world is going to end, and if so, how. So there was a lot of talk a few months ago about this idea of the world's going to end. The world is, the Mayans predicted it. How could they, they predicted this? And from my end, I go into it with a little skepticism, but it's interesting. It's like sort of an interesting thing to think about anyway. So the idea was to create a character whose job is to go into some skepticism and just really sort of like present it as like, all right, what if the world was going to end? Well, how will the world end, and would it really happen that way? So his job is to, he takes a sabbatical and he's working on this idea of like, well, will the world end? So that's one of the things that he does. He and his wife create 3 little robot travelers to document the best things in life, just in case the world does end. So in the story world of all this, Henry is there with his wife, Emily, and they're having this moment of like, well, if you're going to be working on this and you're trying to figure out what the world's going to end, why not document? What is it that made us, what has it made this world amazing? Just in case if it does end. I mean, you're going to be dealing with this idea of destruction and total apocalyptic, conclusions of the human race. And wouldn't it be great if you created these characters that went out and documented what was the best things in this life, so that way, years and generations later, if somebody were to come upon these robot travelers, they would have documented that. So great. And the next thing is that Henry is also dealing with his wife, who's terminally ill. And so he has some actual real thoughts about, what it means to be alive and what it means to be sort of out there. So that's the basic storyline. So going over the friend of a friend guidelines for Zoetic. The idea was to use social networks and connect users to stories and characters, utilize specific tools, so on and so forth. You guys have already seen this, so we'll go to the next one. So then the idea was like, all right, about the tools of the characters. One of the things that you'll notice is that I don't have Flickr on there. And the reason why I didn't have Flickr on there was this idea is like, well, what I want to do is I want to take these robots, send them out there, and on Facebook you can sort of document all that anyway. If I'm putting the same photos on Flickr that I would on Facebook, there's no real point of having both of them. And Facebook was absolutely, integral for the storytelling method. So that's not on there, but we're using Facebook for the robots. So each of the robots have their own Facebook page. There's Google Plus, so Henry is located on Google Plus and he interacts with people that way. There's a Twitter account, which I'll get into. There's a Tumblr and a YouTube. So all these are tools that are available to everyone. It's not like I went out there and I was like, I'm gonna rebuild the idea of what YouTube is, or I'm gonna rebuild what Flickr is, or Facebook. It was this idea of like, these are tools that people use and that are storytelling points, even if it's just about their life. So I'll just go ahead and use that to tell the story. All right. So then my next guideline, this idea of like, well, what's the theme? Well, I've already told it, but I'll say it again. It's about discovering the best of human life. So absolutely every single thing that is in this project goes back to what is discovering the best of human life. That is absolutely integral to everything that you release. It's about this idea of giving people opportunity to actually document what is the best thing in human life. And for me, it may be completely different than what it would be for Hope or Beth, but it's an opportunity for people to engage in this storytelling platform. So the next thing was the next guideline, what I'm calling like first-hand magic. And so where this comes from is I want to give people outside the story the choice to be the hero. And where this comes from for me is that I work in film and I have a lot of friends that are model makers. And we work on these models and they are amazing. They're fantastic. And you get to see them up on screen and they're larger than life and they're really rather incredible. But this kind of sounds weird, but like normal people or people who just who don't work in the movie industry never really experience that. So part of this idea was it's like, well, can we take this magical tool and give people the opportunity to be the hero and put it in their hands? So what I call it is the Help Me Obi-Wan Kenobi moment. So what ends up happening in this particular story is that, I gotta go back one. That's all right. All right, so what ends up happening is that the case on the left is what the robot comes in, and when the case shows up, it comes in this little packing slip and it shows up at your door. When you open it up, there's a manual there that actually goes in and explains, like, this is the project. You have been chosen because one of your friends thinks that you can help the best in telling this story. So now you are faced with the option of like, here you are with your robot. Do you choose to go and help out with the story, or do you pass it along? It's that, do you go save the princess? Do you go and take the journey? Do you go and, experience this and be a part of it? Or do you pass it on? Do you give it up for a moment? And so, once again, it's like, most of us don't necessarily have these, like, real moments that are, like, staring you right in the face where you have to make that choice and the decision. But the idea was giving people that moment where here it is, here's the call, Do you answer it? So, we'll go through each of the robots that are out there. So this has been going on. The robot's been traveling over the last 3 weeks now, okay? So this is Thaddeus. Thaddeus started here in San Francisco. He loves the Embarcadero, so most of his photos that were from here are from the Embarcadero area. I sent him to a friend from college who I hadn't seen since college, and that was about 7 years ago. And I was just like, you know what? You seem like you're taking photos and enjoying things. Here you go, here's a robot. And I gave him the challenge, and he picked it up and started taking photos. And so we started kind of making that happen. And then from there, he's interacting with Henry. So here's Henry, he's interacting, oh, it happens. So he's interacting with Henry, he's not interacting with Justin, because I am Henry, and I'm emailing him and telling him, you know, hey Rob, you know, this is Henry, I know you got a robot, this is what you're trying to do, and I'm interacting with him and talking with him through the whole thing, and he's now going out and, you know, checking into Facebook, he's taking photos of the robot, he's taking videos, he's like creating all this media about the best things in his life in Los Angeles, and then he goes on and sends it to one of his friends. You can't tell probably, but this thing right there, that's a robot silhouette in front of New York. So then he has that moment and he sends it off to his friend Caitlin, who was like best friend as a child and she would love this thing, and it gets sent off to New York. And then it's in New York, and then just today I get the notification that it's heading off to Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, which I've never seen, but you know. And what ends up happening is that when they get there, then all the friends, like all the people that are within their network start friending these robots, and they all want to be a part of their storyline. All right, so that's Thaddeus. Hubert started in San Francisco, went to a host in Sausalito, who then sent it off to Carson City, Nevada, and is going to be off to Vancouver, British Columbia today or tomorrow. And in fact, I mean, this is a little bit unexpected, but we actually have two of the first hosts here tonight. And so Dan, who's that guy right there, Dan was Hubert's first host, and Dan was the person who ended up sending it off to Carson City. And if we go to the next slide, Nova, who started off in San Francisco, and then stayed in San Francisco, and then got sent off to Boston, Massachusetts, and then Charlotte, North Carolina, and this week is heading off to Austin, Texas. The first host is Hannah, who, there it is. And so, Hannah, I had never met before. I was actually in Golden Gate Park, and I was doing a photo shoot with Nova there, and she sort of had this moment of like, what are you doing? What is this robot thing? And it was like, all right, well, I explained it. She immediately friended all three of the robots on Facebook, and then she found me and then was like, this is really cool, I think what you're doing is great. And I was like, well, would you like a robot? And she said, sure. And so, even though my only interaction with Hannah up until that point was a 2 to 3 minute conversation, but part of the idea is about like putting it out there and letting people engage in the story and letting them, you know, rise up to the call to adventure or not. So that's their storylines, and once again, that's been happening for 2.5 weeks, and they're going to be traveling through to December, all the way up until the end of the world. So we'll see what happens. So the next guideline was this idea of engaging the audience. So part of that goes with this idea of giving people the opportunity to actually do things. And so when the robots were first being made, we created this little silhouette, and there was this idea, it's like, what should one of the robots look like? And you sent it out to a bunch of people, and you know, you'd have people in preschool, you'd have people that were a little bit older than preschool, and then you'd have other people that, you know, were just kind of like these crazy details on it. And in fact, that drawing right there is the basis for Hubert. Hubert has a monocle, he has little suspenders, he's got not a bow tie, but a tie, but all of that was because somebody had drawn that, and it was like, yeah, we're gonna make this happen, you know, we are going to engage in what people are telling us to engage with. And so that was one of the ways. And the other thing is that, actually, we go back real quick, sorry. One of the other things is that as the hosts are actually getting this robot, they're bringing them into schools because sometimes they have children. And it's sort of one of those things that, you know, you send them the sheet and then, you know, they go start drawing things and they'll start sending you in photos of like, you know, the hand-drawn things that the entire 5th grade class did. And so now you're engaging people in that storyline. The next thing is this idea of using Twitter. So like I said, each of these tools have very specific purposes. So the point about Twitter is something that any of you here who have a Twitter account can do, which is creating the hashtag Zoetic. And so for those of you who don't know what hashtags are, it's essentially you take something, a tweet, and you attach it to a trend. And so the trend of Zoetic is this idea of how can we discover the best things of human life, okay? So the first tweet that came out with the hashtag Zoetic was this idea of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. Now that is one of the best things in life. And so it's an opportunity for anyone to take photos, to write down whatever it may be, and then put it out there as like, this is what, for me, is the best thing in life. So And the last one, last guideline was this idea of releasing the story in touch points over time. So if we go to the next slide. So one of the biggest things here is this idea that this story takes place over the course of a year. And where we are right now, like January 30th, 2012, is that we are approximately 2 months in, okay? We still have another 11 months to go, all right? So the story is just now starting. So as you go and you start seeing these things, it's going to be sort of like an open platform for anyone to engage in. And over time, more and more media and more material will be a part of it, and you'll start being able to see how people are interacting with it, and how people are pushing it around, and like, you know, how it's starting to develop. But with that, as a creator, my job is, once again, everything leads back to the idea of what are the best things in human life, and kind of bringing it all to that. So releasing things over time to let people play with stuff. So one of the ideas, you know, like I said, I kind of created a, maybe this isn't the slut, I thought. So the idea with time as well is that the story, because it takes place over an entire year, you're using that to your advantage. You can't cut. In a movie, you watch a movie, it's a 2-hour film, and it could, you know, they could be traveling for 6 months, and it's like a cross dissolve, you know, and it could last all of 20 seconds, maybe, you know. But with this, you know, 6 months is going to be 6 months. So every day, new things are going to happen. New people are going to be engaging with it, and it's a different asset, but it's an absolute asset to that storytelling element. And that was one of the things that I found. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Here we go. So the next things that I'll be working on with Zoetic Labs for people to help engage in this. One of the ideas, Henry's story is going to start progressing. So Henry's story has already been happening. Henry created them, and he's been interacting. And every week, he kind of lets people into his life a little bit. But it'll start kind of taking the next step. The next one is creating printable robots. Kind of doing, I love doing paper craft. I don't know if you guys know, like you fold them, and then you got a little 3D model. So anyway, so the idea is giving the people to actually do that, and then if they want to do photos of their own robots and doing whatever it is, you can design and create your own. You can put up a photo, you know, you've seen some of the photos of people creating the robots and putting them in different places, but you have the opportunity to do that. You know, some of the other things is creating a camera app, so actually it'll be able to put the little silhouette of the robot in there, so you can take photos of whatever you want, and just go ahead and like let people know like these are the best things. The reveal of Emily's story, there's a YouTube channel which will be about, you know, doing videos about the best things in human life, and as well doing a quarterly ebook, which will be a curation of everything that's going on and how the conversation's going and what the story is as a whole, as well as there's continued travel. So during this whole time, the robots are going to continue going out there. And there's much more, but for right now, that's to be what I'll tell you. So, what I like to say is complexity is a beautiful thing. This is just where the story is right now. There's certain things that are hidden there, and I know you can't read it, but you have to understand that all these are the different threads and how everything draws itself back. And this is just one way of starting to think and view transmedia storytelling and how we are taking all these different elements, we're focusing them in, and you can start actually tracking them through. As a quick note as well, or maybe I've already said that, but as in one of the notes, there's a number of special things. You know, I'm the one who's up here on the stage and I'm the one up here talking about it, but, you know, to be totally honest, there's like a ton of people who helped make this happen. Paul Garber, who I've worked with on a number of occasions and has helped design and, oh, there he is, there's Paul. So Paul helped design the robots, Paul helps with the designs. I mean, he's incredible, and Paul and I have been working together on projects often. The other person's Fawn. Fawn Davis is a model maker. He's been working in the industry for a number of years, and we would be at his shop working on these at the full time. His entire team helped make that happen. Allison Murphy, who helped out as well and helped give the... and as well, Maya Zuckerman, who's helping me kind of have an understanding of how to put this out there and how to start really kind of making this all flesh and meld together. And of course, all the hosts, because all the hosts have that opportunity to, you know, be a part of the storytelling process or not. And so for like Hannah and Dan and the other hosts that aren't here tonight, I mean, this is a thank you to them. And the point of saying thanks is also a recognition that, okay, Transmedia SF, you know, here we are and here I am. And what I'm here to essentially say is that it's like, look, I've been doing a number of things, and I'm looking to work with other people that are trying to do this stuff. We're trying to explore the ideas of how can they tell their story, how can they tell their story in different ways. And I think if Transmedia SF is going to be successful in any way, it's about making sure that the creative people are creating wonderful things. And not just transmedia work, but the best transmedia work. And so for me, it really kind of sits back and says, it's like, if I can help in any way whatsoever, if you want to just ask me questions, it's like I'm more than happy to be a part of that conversation with you, because it's like I'm creating. And as I'm creating this story, there's 2 or 3 other stories that are kind of in development right now and kind of taking the next steps. But it's really about this idea, it's like, what's going to set us apart and what's going to make us, go forward is by working together as a collaborative, group. And so, last but not least, it's just sort of, that's Zoetic Labs. And that's the project I'm working on.
Thank you, Justin. All right, so I'm actually going to